And you just actually made me realise that we're not just having a chat between us, but this is something that will be out there for other people to watch. So I should actually get you to sort of say who you are and what you do. And if you had to, I guess, elevator pitch, how would you describe what you do now?
Elevator pitch. All right. So I hope we go into the penthouse.
30 seconds on the clock.
So obviously I'm Kirsten, and I was a gymnastics coach for 15 years. I was a triathlete for a big chunk of my elite athletic career. And now I teach gymnastics to swimmers, but it is also to any sport, purely for the benefits of their movement patterns, their connection to their body, and building the strength and flexibility that's needed for these sports that gymnastics develops so well, but is lacking in the development of a lot of sports. Yeah, it's starting to hear how some of the swimmers are going back and how they're feeling with it, and I think how the coaches are coping as well. And even with, some clubs and other clubs not being able to go back, and that real juggle of each club kind of having its own rules, I think is quite a challenge for a lot of people. I think going back is going to be harder than what we thought in different ways.
So what's the kind of things that your swimmers have been saying about the process and going back, and how they're finding or their experiences?
I've asked a lot, like, do you have any fears about going back? A lot, it's the fitness. And I think it's just reassuring them that, when you go on holidays and your whole squad keeps swimming and you come back and you're the only one that's feeling that, it's not going to be like that. Like, everyone's going to be feeling that. So I think, in a way, like, it's something that's affected the entire world. So you're not going to be the only one that feels unfit when you go back in the water. Granted, if you haven't done much during COVID, you feel it a lot more. But if you've done stuff, and if you've done as much as you can with what you've got, then I don't think that fitness element is something to stress about. And it's something that does come back. And I think I did have one swimmer, and she's like, I'm actually really excited because I can make sure all my technique is really sound, because everything's going to feel new again.
An interesting idea, that, isn't it? That time out might actually be a positive.
They had a lot of fears about losing feel for the water and their fitness. And I was a triathlete, and the run was the weakest part of my race. So I would swim and I would come out with the top group. I would ride and I'd stay with the top group. But it got to the run and I was just ran all over the top of. And so my coach was like, right, Kirsten, this winter, you're going to just run. And I swam like once a week, and I barely got on my bike. It was everything was targeted to recover from running. So it wasn't even like riding for riding. It was like riding to recover from running, swimming to recover from running, sorry. And we had to decide that year of competition was kind of going to be like it's okay, just get your run time down. And if you're not swimming well, if you're not biking, it doesn't matter, because we'll pick the following year. But you need to take a year off to work on your weakness, which was my run. So I would just run 110 to 120K a week and just barely get on the bike, barely get in the water, because that was the weakest part of my race. And otherwise, I was just going to keep going, and it was always going to be my weakness. And I think I see a lot of swimmers who are not athletic enough for the sport that they're doing, and they're not strong enough for the sport that they're doing. And yet they're, really performing quite well in the water, but their dryland age is so young and underdeveloped. And a lot of them have been able to use this time to actually try and get it to match more. Because if that dryland age doesn't match, you're at risk of injury, you're underdeveloped in all your movement patterns, and when you then eventually start singing S&C, you're not ready. You haven't got the basics for it. So, I have one girl who, she swims so well. Like, I'm glad she's a water animal, because on land, she really probably wouldn't do too well. And the videos and the improvement that I've seen from her, but she would have never taken this time because it's just her weakness. And it's not nice to work on your weakness for like 6 months. For her, it's been 3 months of, you have to work on your dry land. You've got no other choice. Gymnastics develops so well, but is lacking in the development of a lot of sports. It is that platform for all physical literacy. It really is. It teaches you everything.
I think that word literacy is actually kind of a cool one. And again, for context, I think it's important just for me to sort of say, I think saw some of your stuff on Instagram and was like, yep, that makes so much sense, because it matches those movements and it makes that awareness more prevalent. And we talked about this before, but I think it's something we'll talk about a bit more. But the idea of saying it's literacy, I think, is a simple, really easy way, because when we're in a classroom, people go, oh, you've got to know your ABCs before you can read, before you can write, all that kind of stuff. But that kind of doesn't exist for a lot of physical movement, that we don't think about those milestones as you've got to have that A before you can start to put that into a word, and you can't have a sentence without individual words. And it all sort of feeds back to that, just knowing your alphabet right at the start.
Yeah. And I think the analogy I used very early on in gymnastics, in trying to explain to people, because everyone knows that gymnasts are strong and flexible. So that's kind of the first, like, oh yeah, I'll get more strong and more flexible. They've got good core strength. And it's like, okay, cool. But for me, it runs much deeper. And in any sport, there's only ever taught that sport, essentially. And gymnastics does the same. It's just that the sport is so diverse that so many components are taught. But it's like only knowing a couple of words of your language. And you can't converse. So that means in this body that you need to do as much as you can and move as fast as you can through the water, say, you only know 3 words to get to the other end. And you're not going to be as efficient as you could. And you don't have as many skills to draw upon. And, in COVID, I've been speaking to the athletes about the fact that your fitness is not going to be the same as what it was before COVID. Like, it's a pure fact. Yep. Unless you have been doing the training what you were doing, but I don't think I know. I don't know what I've been able to. So. But if you know how to use your body, that can help you to still feel good in the water under fatigue. And it can also help you to keep good technique for longer, because you can focus on it and draw upon it even under fatigue. And if you don't have that literacy, if you don't have that vocabulary of like a diverse movement, it's just, you're missing out, I guess.
I think the idea as well, we talk about fatigue and being competent on fatigue. It's amazing how often we go, you've shown me a skill, you've got that skill. But the reality is that, can you do that under the changing conditions? And fatigue is one of the easiest ways to test, have you really got it? Is it at that automation stage, or no, there's still work to do?
Yeah, and I think in the sport of gymnastics, we teach the skill, and it's like the messiest part of the stage. Like, it's just, and the failure rate is so high. Like, it's just, and as a coach, you have to kind of keep them in that as much as you can, whilst giving them like mini tastes of success every now and then, so they stay with it. And then, like, there's a lot of times where a test set for gymnastics is, can you replicate that skill 10 times in a row and it looks exactly the same? That to us is like our version of a test set. So can you circle around the bar and hit handstand 10 in a row? If you can do that, we're like, okay, you've learnt it. And then that becomes your warm-up. And that becomes what you need to maintain. And if there's an error in that, so that day you only make 8, that kind of is a bit of a, okay, hang on, what's going on there? And that gives us an idea of any technical issues that are going on. So gymnastics is the mastery of skills, the learning and mastery of skills. It's in a nutshell. That's what it is.
Yeah, and that underlying, not just I like it where you're talking about as a warm-up as well. So when you see then a failure, so essentially it's your review process. Is it actual fatigue? Is it lack of underpinning knowledge in the skill? Is there some other sort of issue? But as a teacher, coach, it gives you that red flag or that indicator that, hey, hold on, we might need to go back and look at something there and see what it is.
I think that's your body is constantly changing, like every minute, every day. And it also gives you an indication of where the body's at. And that's where the warm-up that I'm encouraging the swimmers to do before they get in the water is for them to connect to how their body feels on that day. Because if your lats are tight because you did a gym session last night, your catch and your stroke length will feel a little bit restricted. But if you can open that up and feel that before you get in, you'll then be able to connect with the water, connect with your stroke.
I guess I asked for an elevator pitch before, but even if it's now a little bit of what was your journey from coaching side of things, so where you started with the gymnastics and how you sort of progressed to have swimnastics and how that all sort of occurred.
Yeah, I guess in some instances, I feel like this just landed a gift in front of me. But then I can also see so many parts of the last, my whole life that have led me to where I am now. So as much as, I feel like I'm like, whoa, Ro just called me up and gave me this gift. But he could also see that I had this experience in my life to be able to deliver it. So I was a gymnast up until I was 15, and then I got stress fractures in my lower back. And some of the exercises that I got given then, I literally still give to athletes now. And that taught me, I was a really strong athlete. Like I would win strength tests and I was really flexible, but I was so unstable. And it taught me, that was the time where I really got to learn about my body, and the intelligence that I got to learn then about my body is what then helped me become a triathlete and move through triathlon really quickly. So then I moved to triathlon and I started coaching gymnastics when I was 15. It was just a way to stay in the gym because, you were used to spending 20 hours a week there.
It's your place, your home.
It is. It's your home, and it's like your second family. And that's where I was at MLC Gymnastics Club, and they did a really good job of keeping you connected to the sport in order to help you with your transition wherever you were going to go. So then I started coaching, and I was coaching all the way through my schooling and my university, and I was training full time up until I was 23. And then I decided to have a bit of a break from athlete life. I wanted to explore life a little bit more. I'd finished uni and I took a break from coaching and just traveled for 3 months. And then I came back, and that's when I got my first gymnastics group. And I got to take them for 5 years and progress them. And that was where the most learning in my coaching, I would say, occurred, because I made mistakes. I tried new ways, and I really explored the science at first of coaching and then the art. And I had a beautiful group of girls that taught me a lot, particularly when we got to the teenage side of things. It was hard, but it really did challenge me to refine my coaching skills. And I look back and I had a really intelligent group of kids. And I think that's why I I had to get so good at the art of coaching because they were so smart.
Yeah. So you took that opportunity to learn as much from your students as were teaching at the time.
Oh, they are girls, and they taught me a lot because the way they reacted and the way they, would respond to some of my coaching, it made me really reflect on some of the ways I was going about things. And, I could have been closed to that, but I was always really open to it being a two-way dialogue, because they're in the experience. My journey as an athlete was done. It's not my journey to be the athlete now. It's my journey to be the coach. And so I think that was really clear for me, was making sure that they're in control of their journey, making sure they're accountable for their athletic career, that I guide them and I give them the tools for it. Yeah.
And you sort of made that leap from just the gymnastics into then the swimming, and then sort of looking at that divergence, or that bringing the paths together, I guess.
Yeah, so I think at the time I really didn't realize it was going to take me to where I am now. But at MLC, the gymnastics room and the swimming pool are like literally around the corner from each other. And the swimming program have to walk through the gymnastics office to get to their office. So you become friends with them, and you say hi and you have chats. And I guess I always enjoyed, at MLC, you were part of so many sports. So you also had rowing, you had all these sports to draw upon. And I was always curious at how they operated, because I've always wanted to evolve my coaching, and I didn't want to coach the way gymnastics had been coached for quite a few years, because I could see quite a few parts that needed to be evolved. And so I would talk to coaches from all sorts of sports, and then they knew that I was a triathlete, and they were like, can you please, we're really short on staff, can you please coach swimming? And I was like, okay, I can coach, I know how to swim, like, sure, yeah. So I then had to go to the gymnastics director and ask if I could, start coaching swimming. And I said I really wanted to do it. I had no idea why I wanted to coach swimming, but I was like, I do want to do this. I do want to explore this. So they kind of worked things out in terms of timetabling. So I was able to go and coach swimming where my gymnast would go to ballet. And then when the girls finished at ballet, I would leave pool deck, and then I would go back into the gym. So it was kind of like this, I don't know how they even worked out the timetable, but I'm thankful. Yeah, it worked. So then I coached for a little while, and then it was all a little bit too much. I started my triathlon career it started to increase, and I moved down to Torquay, coastal Victoria, because my coach was in Geelong. And so I had to cut back on things, and I was only coming up to Melbourne on the weekend. So that was my first kind of insight into the swimming world.
Mm-hmm.
And I had written a proposal that never got finished, and I never sent it, that they should be doing gymnastics.
Yep.
Because I would see them just like shooting hoops for dryland and playing tag, or, I would just always feel like this could be more efficient. Like, you guys could really be getting more out of your dryland time. And when I was coaching, there were times where I'd get so frustrated, because I was like, if I just got you on dryland and I could teach you all of this so much faster than if you were in school. But I really made it my challenge to learn how to coach a different way and not rely on this hands-on coaching style that we have in gymnastics, where you are able to talk to them all the time. You can really put them in the right position. And I made it my challenge to how can I engage them so much that from that wall to that wall, they actually are focusing on what I need them to focus on. Yeah. Whereas in gymnastics, you don't really need to develop that, because they're not underwater. So then that was like the first little insert into the swimming world. And then after that, I was asked to go to New South Wales Opens, because they needed a female to go with the team. and I went because I thought it'd be cool. So I went with Nick Valiatis and spent pretty much just a weekend on pool deck. Watched and observed, and then there'd be times where he'd be like, oh, what would you do with that athlete in dryland? And all of a sudden, all these ideas just came, and I'd be like, I do this, 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 and that. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm actually watching and I'm taking stuff in here. And then he would explain to me a little bit more about each stroke and each skill. And I didn't think anything of it at the time. And we came home and I went back to the gym. He was on pool deck, and then nationals came around and he's like, I need a female to come with me again. And I was like, okay. And he's like, it's 10 days. And I was like, oh, I don't know if the gymnastics, like, I don't know if they're going to let me go for 10 days. And just as well, you guys have nationals over Easter, which that really probably let me go because we didn't train.
The difference, yeah.
Yeah. So then I went to swimming nationals that year and sat on pool deck for 10 days. And I loved the community of the coaches. And then I so happened to come back and I got a call from Gymnastics Australia because Nana Wadding had contacted them asking if gymnastics could be taught to their swimmers. And they called me because they knew I kind of had this formed hybrid between the sports. So I sat in on a pitch meeting and they were pitching like a recreational program. And I remember sitting there just going, this is not what swimming needs. It's a wonderful program for developing young kids, but swimming needs a more specific dryland program than this. And that was where it all kind of kicked off, I guess.
So when you were going through that process and I guess having had those experiences when this needs to be more specific, when did some of those specific things start to drop into place for you? Was it when you sort of had watched and you started to think, or was it when you sort of, okay, went around into the shed and went, okay, I'm going to try some of these things, and does that connect? Or so when did you see those connections?
They're constantly evolving. Like I'll still stand on pool deck and be like, oh, actually we could do this on dryland. So I'm never not on pool deck with like a notebook or at least like notes on my phone. I'll talk to coaches all the time and they'll say a trouble they're having and I'll be like, okay. And I love problem solving, I guess. So, you know, I'll listen to whatever the coach is trying to get into their kids and I want to get there the fastest way.
Yeah.
That's probably the biggest thing. And, you know, if I can help them get there the fastest way by having a dryland drill, then that's where I can help. At the start, the first connection I saw was like tumble turns and forward rolls. That was like the start. And it's fun for the kids. But that was the first real connection. The next one was handstands and streamline.
Yep. It's funny. So it's funny you say that because I think I mentioned to you the first thing I saw of yours was the tumble turn one and the forward roll one. I was like, so obvious. Of course, it's great. But when you mentioned the streamline as well, it was just trying to learn handstands, and I was like, hold on, yeah, I actually feel that connection because you've got to think about where your hips are in line with your feet and that tension throughout the body, and not just as swimmers. I know people tend to have really good focus on the upper body stuff, but forget about what the legs are doing. And I think for me, I felt it for the first time when I actually was doing handstands or trying to do handstands for the first time. And that's really interesting. Sort of go first obvious one, rolls, tumble turns, and then handstands, streamline, because it makes sense as well when you actually try it.
Yeah, and I think when we're developing gymnasts, we spend about a quarter of the time developing a handstand, for developing a straight line.
Yep.
That is like if they come in there for 2 hours, half an hour of their program will be developing a handstand because it is the fundamental skill in gymnastics. And if you think of swimming, streamline is the basis of all strokes.
Yep.
Like if you have good body position, it's then about learning how to move from that position for all 4 strokes.
Yep.
And gymnastics spends so much time developing it because it is complex. We no longer are in a society where the anatomy is normal. Like, it's what the skeleton is, but normal people are not in anatomical position. You know, for us to even have our, you know, our palms facing forward with that openness across the chest, you know, we're on iPads, we're on computers, we're not there anymore. And so we spend a lot of time developing that straight line shape, and it's developing the flexibility for it, it's developing the strength for it, and then it's developing the connection of the whole body. So in a lot of high performance programs, you can't start training until you balance a handstand for a minute. And the whole idea, it kind of comes back to what we were talking about before, is that mastery. If you can balance something for a minute, you really understand the detail and the depth of it. Yesterday, I had to balance 3 handstands for a minute, and the focus that's required to get that is like, and I know I always lose it right through my lower abs. So I always have to focus on controlling through the middle body. But the water supports swimmers, so the water doesn't give them the feedback as quickly. Maybe your time was slower when you got to the other end, you didn't fall over. Whereas if I lose body connection, lose body control in a handstand, I fall over. And the minutes, like, you didn't get your minute. The consequence is so instant.
That's an interesting point, that consequence being instant. And it comes back to where you're talking about that space to make mistakes. And I think when we talked last time, we were talking about failure and failing in a safe way. And it really is that need to be able to have that. You can't just teach for, all right, here's the thing, and you just get to that thing. You need to have that opportunity to, it didn't work that time. Why didn't it work? What do I have to change? How does that feel when I change it as well? So, yeah, I think that idea of immediate consequence, you're right, that being in water is so different to being on land.
Yeah. And I think one of my mentor coaches, she was higher up in the Chinese coaching team, and she was a really successful gymnast over in China. But she would set up her gymnasts with so much feedback that if it was not right, they knew straight away. And like the biofeedback that she used on all her drills, she was so clever that she would set them up to fail safely so often that they would learn to do it right, because that was when they would get success. And that enabled them to explore movement and self-learn safely. And that worked to really connect them to how to feel movement, rather than it always being this external feedback. Because if we're giving external feedback, we're actually taking them away from the internal experience of feeling movement. And she was really smart with that.
It's an interesting thing, and it's sometimes really hard as that external person to allow that time and space. And I know, again, from then an understanding of like a parent's point of view, the fastest way to get them to develop a skill is to give them lots of that external feedback. But the depth of understanding of that skill comes more from the opportunity to discover a lot more. And I think that's a priority, or how we have to prioritize sometimes is, if I step back and create that space, it's going to take them longer. But is the outcome better? Probably.
Yeah, and I think it's constantly adjusting with a period in the learning. Like, the learning is like, it's such a continuum. And you need to feed them different parts at each part on the continuum. You know, you won't coach a high performance squad the same as what you coach learn to swim. And it's no different in learning a skill. They're a learned swimmer for that skill, and then they become a high performance of that skill. And you will give them different feedback. You'll give them a different experience for that entire journey towards mastery of a skill. And, you know, there is at the start, you know, it will be a lot of external because they're learning the skill for the first time, but it's a matter of then taking it away so they can actually have the experience of the movement.
I talk about it a lot when we talk about developing skills, that you go, your first priority is to develop the skill, and then your job is to challenge that skill. And it's kind of that same idea that, yeah, there has to be the hands-on initially to get the nuts and bolts, the basic progressions, but ultimately you need to be able to have them understand. If I say for a handstand, for example, if someone pushes a little bit one way, what do I do to correct that? And it doesn't come from someone telling you. It's what does that feel like, and then where's the connection come to make the adjustment.
Yeah, and I think it's a matter of, I don't think it's taught in coaching, how to teach athletes how to feel movement. Yeah. I really don't think it's taught. I think we're taught how to be biomechanists. We're taught how it needs to look. And then we're taught how to get performance. And then there's this massive gap in the middle, and naturally talented athletes have feel. But the ones that don't need to be taught. Yeah. But I don't think coaches are taught how to teach that.
I think the idea of feel, when someone has feel, it can seem easy, but then when they hit the challenge, if it's not recognised by a teacher or a coach, then it's, okay, it's too hard now, necessarily. So I think you're right. As a teacher or coach, there's a big gap in that space of process and understanding, but what's all in that middle field.
Yeah, and I think, the way, if you've ever had the opportunity to coach a really talented athlete, it's a completely different way of coaching or teaching, and recognizing that and respecting that. And it is actually still really hard, but in a different way.
Of reflection and the importance of reflection for you. So we kind of touched on it when you talked about when you sort of made this shift into what is now swimnastics, and how you took these gymnastics concepts, and on reflection, how you sort of evolve and develop as a teacher / coach, and how important that process is. So yeah, how do you sort of see reflection as part of your growth or development?
Back in those years where I had a group for 5 years, I literally would sit in a cafe for about an hour before I coached, and I would sit and reflect for about half an hour to an hour after every session. Yep. And on my program for the day, it was not what the kids saw, but I would have scribbles all over it with like, so-and-so needs to move into the high beam, you need to work on this and that, this is the focus. And it was just adding intention to the program. So the program, anyone can write a good program, but it's how it's delivered. Yep. And it was setting that really clear intention and individualization to the entire group that I had. And it would even be like, you need to create cohesion on this apparatus, or, let's challenge, put a little bit of pressure on now because, there is mastery on this apparatus at the moment. So let's put a bit of pressure on and just see if there are any cracks in our development before we go to competition. Yep. And then on the other side of that, I would reflect for ages after each session. And I think that's where that is the coaching is more than the 4 hours that I'm in the gym, or the 2 hours that you're on pool deck. And one of my mentors, she was like, I think she's now probably nearly 70. And she was like, Kirsten, I need to take a break from coaching because I just want to be able to lay down on my pillow at night and not be thinking about my athletes. And so that is what the fatigue, can come in, because you're always thinking about your athletes and how you can get them better. Hence, I'm now like on my sabbatical, because I then got to the stage where it's like, I need a break about thinking what my athletes need all the time. But reflection is, I think, the utmost importance for involvement of self and understanding of self in order to then give the best you can.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And I think this is something that we've probably started to share one of our opinions on anyway. And when we talk to developing teachers and those kind of things, and we've used reflection as a really important part of the process, often it's, oh yeah, sure, whatever you say. I reflect all the time. But when you kind of, like you said, it's that brain going all the time, when you're really starting to break down, where are they at? How do I talk about that? Is there a better way that I could deliver or make it easier for them to understand what I'm saying? And it is that fatigue that sets in because it's constantly going. But I think it's also one of the most exciting things about personal growth and development. And it's something that I actually noticed I was doing. So after our chat last week, that I went away and reflected on that, and it was like, okay, well, what are some of the things that in that conversation that I could grab onto and evolve or use or challenge myself with? So yeah, I think reflection is that really important thing that we often overlook as for personal growth, but also as an opportunity for our students to learn from as well.
Yeah, and I think it can come in many forms. Like for me, I need to get it on paper. Like I need to write it, just to kind of release it and get it out. So I'll often you could call it journaling, you could call it whatever you want, but for me, it's just writing, from a pen to a piece of paper. And I will do that most days. And it's really started on writing on kind of my program for the day. And even after that, I would then kind of scribble all over the program with what I'd change and what I'd evolve. And then Saturday afternoon, so the end of the week, I would then go to a cafe and I would sit there and reflect on the entire week, reflect on each athlete. But I think for me, I had to learn how to kind of be able to turn it off every now and then too. So that's where meditation kind of came in for me, in being able to get that stillness and that break from that constant thinking about, how could I have done that better, or what does that athlete need from me? Because you are in a position of giving as a coach or even as a teacher, and you are constantly giving so much of yourself. And for me, I had to learn how to keep topping up my energy, so I could keep giving.
If you said, what's the purpose of the basics of what you do now?
Yeah, so I think I have a different intent and purpose for coaches as I do athletes. And so I'll start with the athletes just to give a deeper understanding of how I engage with the dryland, so that then it can link back to the coaching intention. So when I'm working with swimmers, the intention is that you need to connect to how you're feeling in your movement. And that is of the utmost importance. So many times when I start working with swimmers in dryland, everything's done fast, everything's done hard, and nothing's done with awareness. And it's just to tick off the program. And that you'll get a result from that, like hands down, but you're missing out on so much from it. And that's the bit that I am always getting onto them about. You need to understand the detail. You need to connect to how the movement actually feels. So dryland does not always need to be done fast and hard. And as I joke with them, I'm like, your swimmers, everything's, who can get to the other end the fastest? Whereas gymnastics is who did it the best. Dryland needs to be the place where it's pure movement and it's pure technique and it's pure slowing down and doing things right. And then on pool deck, there are times where you can just be like, get to the other end as fast as you can.
Yep.
And let the dryland sink in that way.
There's that quality over quantity, but there needs, when we talk about purpose, it's still, sometimes that purpose is to get there faster, but to understand that or to facilitate that, we need to do the other stuff well. So yeah. Back to that quality of it.
Yeah, and then my intent for coaches is more to be a framework of education. So, if you have a methodology of dryland because, maybe you've got a degree, or maybe you've done a course, or maybe you've got a background, or you've had an experience, then great. Look at the Instagram and, watch my sessions and just take whatever ideas you want. But if you don't have a method for developing an athlete, for developing dryland, then this can be your method. And then from there, you can start to add on. But I think it's about teaching that the dryland, one, needs to be developed. It needs to be developed with intent. And there needs to be a purpose behind every exercise you're doing. If you're doing burpees, that's great, but know you're doing them to get the heart rate high. You're doing them for any other movement pattern. If you are doing mountain climbers, why are you doing them? And what's the purpose behind every exercise you're doing?
I think one of the things that we've talked about previously is then that doing as well. So not just, oh yeah, that's the thing that I want someone else to do, but have you tried that? Have you done it yourself? And what did that feel like? Did you discover that it was easier, harder, different to what you expected? And I think that's, again, something that I've enjoyed seeing with your stuff is you muck around and you try things. And I don't think there's enough people that do that sort of actually go, you know what, I wonder if, and then try that if.
Yeah. And I think there's been groups that I've gone into, like with coaches, and I've been like, right, this is a practical session. Unless you've got an injury, you're doing this. And I love it when the coaches are like, I'm joining in, and I'm like, please do. Like, and often when I have, maybe it's a training camp, and I'm just going there as a fun dryland person. Often I will spend the most time with the coach, because if they're getting a felt experience of the movement and I can really connect to them, then they will take it back to the 30 other swimmers in the room. These 30 swimmers in the room are going to see me once potentially, but this coach is the person that's going to contact these 30 swimmers each week. So if they get this felt experience, if they learn more about how the body moves and how it feels to hold the shapes and do the activities, then they can take it back. And without feeling it, you only know, it's only like conceptual knowledge. If I hadn't have actually ever got in the water, I wouldn't be able to come up with half the stuff I come up with. But when I'm talking to the athletes, when I work with one of the swimmers, she's an open fly swimmer. When I first started working with her, I would actually schedule in my week that I would go for a swim after every session with her, because I'd ask her, what troubles are you having with your fly? What are you feeling? What are you not feeling? And then I'd go to the water and I'd be like, okay, all right, this is how she must be feeling. Okay, how can I help this? And, there are times when I'm coaching and I'm like, okay, just get off. I'll work it out. Because they're like, I can't feel it. And I'm like, I've used all the cues I know. So I'm like, get off. I'll do it. I'm like, okay, maybe feel like this. And then they get back on. But I agree.
It's almost that playtime, and I think sometimes I know I get funny looks sometimes when I'm in the water and it's like I'm playing, I'm seeing what happens if I do this or that, and you'll get looks from sort of either parents or lifeguards or something. It's like, what are you doing? Why? But it's that, it's the figuring it out yourself and going, all right, that was horrible, it was a disaster, but we tried it, and it means that I can not worry about that again, but focus on these things that kind of worked or had a progression of some sort. So I think that trial and try and muck around and see what happens is really important.
Yeah, and I think constantly being open to learning, I think that's like, I think, as teachers, it can be often hard to then drop into being the learner. That's that constant swap, because when you're the teacher, you have to show confidence and you have to show knowledge to your students. And not that it's a front, but you kind of have to have this, you have to carry yourself with this knowledge. But then you need to be able to go back and humble yourself in that you are still learning, and we are all still learning. And I am always learning. I've got so much more to learn.
I think that comes back to that reflection and that awareness to know that reflection is really important, and awareness that the journey is ongoing.
Sounds good. All right. Nice to see you too.
Actually see you. Yeah.
Bye.
See ya.